Back to SportsLine, everybody, right here on News Channel 5 Plus. Titans Bengals coming up this Sunday at Nissan Stadium. A huge AFC game, and we are pleased to be joined by the longtime play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Bengals, my dear friend. We go back a long way. That means we're old, but you know what? We're still here. Dan Hoard joins us from Cincinnati. Dan, good evening. Welcome back to the show.
JB, always a pleasure to be on with you. I'm old, you're not, so that's the truth. But it's always great to be on the show with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. Always looking forward to Titans and Bengals. I mean, you know, we'll get into what happened in that playoff game in just a little bit. But I want to talk about the Bengals at first. To start off, Dan, a huge win for them at Pittsburgh. You know, I used to work in Pittsburgh. I covered a lot of Bengals-Steelers game, especially at Heinz Field and whatever it's named now. And the Bengals have always struggled there. But, hey, A, they needed that win, and B, they needed a divisional win. How big was that victory for them last week over the Steelers?
It was huge. And Joe Burrow, in his initial comments in the post-game news conference, really without being asked about it, said, "This is one of my favorite wins since I've been here," which really caught me off guard. I mean, obviously, they won the AFC Championship last year on the road in Kansas City. You would think nothing would compare to that. But a regular season win at Pittsburgh with the Steelers defense healthy again on a cold, raw day with everybody waving those terrible towels. He felt it was a really special win, and I thought it was a special one too, but it elevated itself after hearing Joe say that.
You know, when you look at the Bengals, you're right. They made that run to the Super Bowl last year, and if you get Aaron Donald blocked on that last play, who knows? You might be wearing a ring right now, Danny. But they always talk about Super Bowl hangover, and the team that loses the Super Bowl usually has a tougher season the next year. It seems like the Bengals have weathered the storm. You know, a disappointing opening day loss to Pittsburgh at home, losing Jamar Chase due to injury. I know he's coming back soon, and hopefully we'll get an update on him a little bit later. But, it seems like the Bengals have done a good job of kind of, keeping the ship afloat despite some adversity at times during the season.
Yeah, that's accurate. Similar to the Titans, both teams started 0-2 and then have been playing really well since. You could probably make the case that Kansas City, Tennessee, and Cincinnati are the three teams that have played the best since week 2 in the AFC. The biggest thing for the Bengals is after that Tennessee game in the playoffs last year where Joe Burrow got sacked 9 times, they rebuilt their offensive line. 4 of the 5 guys are new, and it took a while to gel. They struggled in the first few weeks of the season. They gave up 7 sacks in week 1. They gave up 6 sacks in week 2. Since then, for the most part, the offensive line has played pretty well, and they're getting better. So I would think that bodes well if they can keep those 5 guys together and continue to see them develop chemistry and camaraderie and continue to gel as a group.
How much has the passing game, Dan, changed with Jamar Chase being out, or has it changed much?
It has changed, as you would expect. You take away that guy, and you're taking away one of the top 2 or 3 wide receivers in the NFL. Fortunately, with the combination of T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, they're still solid, I would say, overall at wide receiver. But you just don't have that guy that can turn an 8-yard pass into a 75-yard touchdown. The thing of many things that are great about Jamar Chase, the thing that stands out the most to me is just his ability to go from 0 to 60 in 2 strides.
Right.
I think it consistently catches opposing defensive backs off guard. They think they've got an angle. They're in the same position they are as they would be against anybody else to make a tackle, and the next thing you know, Jamar Chase is gone. So they don't have anybody like that. But like I said, they still have a pretty solid 1-2 punch in Higgins and Boyd.
Yeah, and also noticed that the running backs are used a lot in the passing game. P. Ryan had 3 touchdowns last week against the Steelers. I know Mixon's dealing with concussion protocol, but Burrow's not afraid to, take his check downs to his running backs and let them make plays, right?
Correct. And that's something he's really had to adjust to this year because nearly every team that they've played has kept 2 safeties back and just said, you are not going to throw it deep against us like you did last year with Chase and Higgins in particular. We are going to force you to have 10 and 12 play drives and try to nickel and dime your way up the field. So It wasn't necessarily the easiest thing, I think, for Joe Burrow to do from a philosophical standpoint at the beginning of the season, but he's a smart guy, and if that's what he has to do in order to win, that's what he'll do. And those short passes to the running backs have been very effective in recent weeks.
Dan Hoard is our guest. He is the longtime radio play-by-play announcer for the Cincinnati Bengals. Titans and Bengals coming up this Sunday at Nissan Stadium. So, Dan, talking to Mike Vrabel today and a bunch of players, the message was pretty clear. From the Titans' perspective, this is not a quote-unquote revenge game from the playoff loss back last January. I personally am not buying it. What are the Bengals saying about coming back here to Nissan Stadium, the scene of the crime, if you will, after they pulled off that huge upset in the playoff game against the Titans?
Yeah. You know, I think their view is it's definitely a revenge game for the fan base. Mm-hmm. They are expecting it to be a crazy atmosphere. Everybody's, going to be a little salty after seeing the top-seeded team in the AFC get knocked off on their home field last year by a Bengals team that not that many people, expected to do much last season after winning a total of 6 games the previous 2. So I don't think that they necessarily think that the Titans players have a huge revenge motivation, but I think they're expecting the atmosphere to feel very much like an entire city would like to see a little revenge.
How about you personally, Dan? What do you remember about that night? I mean, it was a magical night, obviously, for the city of Cincinnati, for the Bengals organization to pull off that huge upset, to know that, hey, next week we're playing for a shot to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that playoff game at that point, anything that the Bengals did was just a total bonus because the week before they beat the Raiders at home, and it ended the longest playoff drought of any team in the NFL. They had gone more than 3 decades without winning a playoff game, and it was such an albatross hanging over the organization. They kept going year after year after year under Marvin Lewis, and they could never win that first playoff game. So when they beat the Raiders the week before they played Tennessee, it was so cathartic for everybody in Cincinnati. It was just this big moment to have that monkey off their back, that anything after that was just found money. And I think that's how we felt, certainly against Tennessee and even to a bigger extent against Kansas City since it meant a trip to the Super Bowl.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the Bengals defense. You obviously don't go on winning streaks in this league without playing good defense. What are you seeing from the Bengals defense so far, and how do you think they'll attack the Titans offense, which all of a sudden has found its passing rhythm? At least they did last week against Green Bay.
I would say that the Bengals defense has played better than the offense to this point of the season. Now, the offense has been clicking the last few weeks. They've scored 30-plus in 3 out of their last 4 games. But the defense has been solid throughout. They've really only had one bad game all year. That was the Monday night game in Cleveland a few weeks ago. But aside from that, the defense has been great. There's one big qualifier, though, and that is the loss of their top corner, Chidobe Awuzie. I'm not sure that the rest of the NFL knows much about Chido, but he's played like a top 5 corner now for the past year and a half. He tore his ACL in that Cleveland game. He's out the rest of the season. And they're still pretty solid in the secondary, but I think it's fair to question if that is going to ultimately limit their ceiling. Can they beat the great passing teams in the NFL without having a shutdown corner? I don't know the answer to that question, but it's a very legitimate question at this point.
Talk with Dan Hoard, the radio play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, the Titans host the Bengals this Sunday at Nissan Stadium, a rematch of last January's playoff game. Just realized, Dan, I asked you all these questions about Jamar Chase. When do you guys expect him to be back? Would he be available to play this Sunday?
We'll see. He's going to try to practice tomorrow. So this would be the first time since his hip injury that he will attempt to practice. When the Bengals discovered the injury, initially the thought was, well, let's put him on injured reserve. But if you do that, you have to miss a minimum of 4 games. They had their bye in the middle of all of that, but it's not 4 weeks, it's 4 games.
Right.
So they talked to the doctors, they talked to the training staff, and they said, with his incredible, freakish physical abilities and the likelihood that he would recover faster than a normal human being, we think he could be back in 4 weeks. So rather than put him on IR, they kept him on the roster. He has been out for 4 weeks, but only 3 games. And they think there's a legitimate chance he'll be back this week. They've got a home game against Kansas City next week. They'd certainly like to have him available for those 2 tough games. So we'll start finding out tomorrow when he takes the practice field.
Awesome, Dan. Great stuff. Always great to have you on. You know, you and I go back a long way, and you were there when I started my career, and I don't know if I'd have a career without you, my friend. And I'm glad to see that you're still kicking it, going strong, busy as ever, just like me. We don't stop, man. Us old war horses, we don't stop. I look forward to the game on Sunday, and I look forward to seeing you as well. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family as well.
Thanks, JB. Same to you. Appreciate it. And thank heavens this has worked out for both of us because we're not capable of doing anything else.
That's right. Be well, my friend. Thank you so much.
All right, you got it.
All right, there he goes, Dan Hoard, the great longtime play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Bengals as the Bengals get set to come to Nissan Stadium Sunday to take on the Titans, a noon kickoff. All right, time for a break. We'll do more Titans talk. We'll take your phone calls as well. Stay with us here on SportsLine.